For more, we can speak to Michael Bluck, director of the Center for Nuclear Engineering at Imperial College. Hello to you, Michael. Thank you for speaking to Paris Direct. First of all, what lessons did we draw from Chernobyl?
I think there are probably three main lessons. The design of the reactors is really important, and that's not very surprising. It's worth noting that the reactor in Chernobyl is very different to anything that we have in the rest of Europe, or indeed the rest of the world. Um, and it had was a design fault, and it was known about, and that was a major contributor. Secondly, there was the operation of the reactor. It was operated, unfortunately, on that tragic day in a manner that really went beyond the safety limits of the reactor, and the many of the reactor staff knew this. There was difficulties in handover and other aspects of operation, so it was essentially put into a dangerous state. And really covering all of that was the really quite difficult or different situation that we have here, and that's authority. The culture in a top-down authoritarian Soviet state had a profound role in both the cause and response to the event. So the state authorities' demand for electricity interrupted an experiment, left it in a dangerous state, and the reoperator should have rejected this, but felt unable to do so.
Yeah,
That would never happen in a Western context.
but so many of those factors. I mean, the critics of nuclear energy say it only has to happen once. They point to Chernobyl, they point to Fukushima in 2011. The argument is that the risks outweigh the benefits. Do you think that argument's fair?
I suppose I would say this. Not really. If you look at Fukushima, the number of attributable deaths to radiation is arguably between 0 and 1. If you look at Chernobyl, although at the time it was forecast by some to lead to 500,000 deaths, UNSCEAR, the UN body tasked with analysing this over the recent decades, puts the figure more at like 4,000. All of those are tragic, of course. But if we look at the numbers of deaths that fossil fuels cause, it's incomparable. Now, that's not to diminish the effect on the local population, indeed the economy, but you have to. All energy sources come with their risks, and the actual numbers are much less than public perception or media perception has it.
Yeah, and part of the difficulty in reporting on this is just the fact that some of the science is so sophisticated that whether it's the media or the audience, it might be difficult to explain that in lay terms. Besides the human cost of some of these disasters that we're discussing, what would you say the environmental side effects are of nuclear energy?
Well, as I said, if you totaled up per megawatt hour generated of energy, the total deaths due to nuclear, it's similar to wind, which I think most people would find remarkable. So you have to look at, the numbers of deaths. It looks very emotive, and indeed it is, but it's if you look at the numbers, then it really isn't the threat that we perceive it to be.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy, or comparison there. I'm not sure if this is your domain, but I want to ask you anyway for your take on it. Because of the war in Ukraine, we saw concerns about Europe's energy dependence on Russia. Because of the ongoing war in Iran, we see similar concerns about reliance on natural gas from the region. How should Europe pursue energy independence?
That's the question. It's led to the growth and interest in deployment of new nuclear. Is that energy independence? Is it energy security rather than actually net zero? We've seen a massive and welcome growth in renewables across Europe, and that's great. What's become really clear is that energy systems also need contributions from reliable, what we call dispatchable energy sources if we're to have reliable and cost-effective systems. That's what we want. Nuclear is really the only low carbon dispatchable baseload technology there is, and Europe has a strong history in this area. What are the alternatives? There's always alternatives. Batteries to address renewable intermittency are useful in many contexts, but they don't work at grid scale. Carbon capture and storage isn't economically viable. Biofuels and biomass, they're questionable. The hydrogen economy is as yet uneconomical. Perhaps this might all change with some emerging technological leaps, but that's just relying on hope. If you want low carbon and you want to sort of not have the energy security at the moment, I would say that nuclear is the best option.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, no energy source comes without risk. Here in France, President Emmanuel Macron promises nuclear renaissance, but the country has long gotten its supply of uranium from Niger. That came to an abrupt end with a military coup 3 years ago. Since then, Macron's tried to find alternatives, visiting Kazakhstan and Mongolia. Talk to us a little bit about how difficult it is for countries to sort of find the right sources and have the partnerships, along with China's rise in nuclear power.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, former sources, much like gas in a way, are now problematic. Kazakhstan isn't without its problems, uh, but those aren't the only sources. So there are friendly sources. Australia has a great deal of uranium, as does Canada. Um, so 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 there's not essentially France got it probably for colonial reasons. That was a good place to get in Niger. Kazakhstan doesn't look particularly attractive right now, perhaps due to its geography or its location. But as I say, there are other places, Canada and Australia. I don't think there's no perception in the nuclear industry that sourcing of the uranium is difficult.
All right, Michael, thank you very much for your time. Michael Bluck from Imperial College. Thank you.